One of the biggest reasons people are excited about the Nikon ZF is the manual focusing experience. It's really fun, lets you use lots of cool vintage glass, and it's great. But there's 5 important things that I do to change this that make it a lot better for me, and I think they'll work well for you too. And these aren't like the regular stuff everybody's talking about, so let's dive in. Recently, I received the Typox Samara 35mm f1.4Z for testing, and it's gorgeous. It means now we actually have the 28, 35, and 50, so we're gonna do some really cool videos with all of that. They're gorgeous, the build quality is amazing, and the photos that come out of them are absolutely great. However, one of the big issues with them is the fact that it's a non-chipped lens. That means that there's no electronic contacts and it doesn't communicate with the camera body. There's 2 issues with this. One is that you don't get any EXIF data, so you don't actually know what lens you shot with. And the other one that pertains to this video is the fact that you don't get manual focus confirmation, which is one of the coolest things about the Nikon ZF. You do still have subject detection and you can still use things like focus peaking, but that manual focus detection is so powerful. The fact that you don't have it, it kind of sucks, to be honest. But I don't think that it is a total deal breaker for me because of the things that I've done to shift the way that I shoot with the Nikon ZF when I'm using manual lenses. And this isn't just an issue with the Typox lenses. Lots of vintage glass will not allow you to do this. And some other glass won't either, unless you use 2 different adapters stacked on top of each other. It's actually a pretty ingenious way to do it, but I don't love having to use adapters if I don't have to. And the fact that these are native Z mount is great. So I've made these changes and it's helped me with the Typox lenses as well as other vintage glass. And really cool, some of these have actually helped me using the chipped lens as well. So I think it's something that you should definitely look into, and we're gonna start here with number 1. Now, in order to do this first one, you're going to need firmware 3.0, which was just released. Now, don't worry, I know a lot of people are hesitant to put a new firmware under their camera until lots of people have tested it. 2 things. 1, if your ZF is your only moneymaker camera and you use it professionally, I get it, maybe wait a little while. But I haven't really heard anything about bugs or issues, so I think you're pretty safe at this point. It's been out for a little while now, and I think overall things are fine. So go ahead, download that firmware, and hope it doesn't brick your camera. It didn't brick mine or anyone I've heard of. And what you're gonna do is you're going to go to the custom settings menu, and then you're gonna scroll into the focus tab all the way down to A12. A12 is focus peaking only during zoom. And here's why I love this, and I'm so glad they added it. To me, focus peaking is pretty annoying. It's a necessary evil. I find that it really distracts me sometimes, and it makes it hard for me to imagine my composition because, until you get the focus exactly how you want it, other things that maybe you don't want are in focus, and it's kind of all off, and it just distracts me. What's cool is that you can have it set up now where if you press the zoom button, which you're probably gonna do anyways if you're trying to get critical focus, it will show you the focus peaking. But if you zoom back out, it won't show you it. So you have a clean composition, you don't have to worry about that. And for me, I find it's just such a big game changer. I'm so glad they added it. And that's the first step to the other 4 that really, really have helped me. So I would recommend changing that right away. In addition to that, I would say 2 things. 1, set your focus peaking to low and pick a color that makes sense for you. I use blue because I always have. I don't really like the red. However, I do find the red works pretty well with step number 5 that you're gonna see here. So red or blue I think are great. I would probably avoid things like yellow or white because I don't think that they are clear or distinct enough. And the last thing about this is I would say if you are doing a lot of zone focusing, I find this actually to be kind of especially helpful in some cases. Let's say you're doing street photography, you wanna set it to f8 and you kind of just wanna keep your focus where it is. Well, if you have focus peaking turned on, it's gonna be there all the time and that is really distracting. So if you're doing zone focusing, this is especially helpful. Setting number 2 is to change your front dial to control your ISO. Now, I know this might seem kind of basic, but typically what people do with this camera is they either use the top dial to control the ISO or they set it to C and then they map the record button to be the ISO. From there, when you press down the record button, you can turn auto ISO on or off with the front dial, and then your back dial can be what you use for changing the ISO. This is great, this works really, really well, but I find if I'm using dedicated manual focus lenses, I like to set it up a little bit differently, especially if I'm using a lens that has an aperture ring. So what I do is I have it set up so that my front dial always controls my ISO and the back dial controls the shutter. That way I'm not having to worry about popping into auto ISO on and off all the time. Now, it's just like a little change, but I find that it's really helpful in this scenario. The reason I don't use it when I'm using, fully automatic lenses is because I find that usually if I'm shooting in auto AF, I probably am also in a situation where sometimes I do want to be able to automatically trust that auto ISO. And you can still do that with this, that's totally fine. But I do find that it's something that is helpful. This just means that it's really quick to change all the parts of my exposure triangle. I can use my right hand really quickly with the dials to just change ISO and shutter, and then I use my left hand with my focusing tab. I can just move it to the aperture ring and change it. But what about if you don't have an aperture ring? Well, here's my solve for that. What I do is instead I keep that top record button as my ISO so I can still quickly change into auto ISO if I want. But what I do is I set the front function button. That one instead is what I use to change my aperture. What's cool about this is how much it actually lets you control the camera, because what you do is you use your pinky finger to actually access the aperture, and then you use your thumb to use the back dial to move it around. You let go of that, and then all of a sudden your thumb is again using your shutter. Your middle finger is going to be adjusting your ISO, and then your index finger is going to be the one that is canceling the zoom and taking the photo. And then your left hand is obviously focusing. So it's so fun, like it's such a cool way to really use the camera. And that's again, if you're using a lens that allows you to change the aperture but doesn't have an aperture ring. So that's just a kind of cool way of doing it. For number 3, we're staying in the custom settings menu, and we're going to go to shooting/display, which is part D, and you're gonna go to D18. This is half press to cancel zoom. I find that it is so much easier to compose, zoom in to check my critical focus. However, the problem is once I'm zoomed in, I kind of want to double check my framing and everything, right? Because ultimately, that's what's most important to me. Being tiny bit off with my focus is frustrating, but having a bad composition with a focused photo is just useless. So I have it set up when I half press the shutter button, it punches back out to my regular frame. Now, I think this is really helpful, but one thing you have to make sure that you do is practice a little bit, because it's really easy while you're grabbing focus to accidentally press down that half shutter and then punch back out. So you have to practice with it a little bit and have a bit of a light touch, but honestly, do it for like a couple hours and you will feel confident with it and it won't be a big deal. I find it so much easier to get the framing I want, punch in quickly to zoom and punch back out to take the photo. As long as I'm not moving around a ton, I'm gonna have the right focus, and it doesn't really slow me down all that much. And again, it's a manual focus experience. Everything is going to be just a little bit slower anyways. Setting number 4, staying in the custom settings menu, you're gonna go to F and go to F4. That is going to be enable touch function. Now, hear me out on this. Normally, I don't like using touch function on the actual camera screen very often. There's definitely times where it's helpful, but overall I find that sometimes it can just kind of get in the way or you accidentally touch stuff. But if you practice with it a bit, it's great. And I've used it to great success quite a few times. And the way I like to have this set up is as follows. This is a bit unique. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to start by turning on the touch function, and then you're going to set what area you want to actually enable. For me, it is the right 50% of the actual touchscreen. That way, if I have the camera held up and I'm holding my eye to the EVF, I can still use my thumb to move around. That's really, really convenient. The next thing you have to do is decide what function it's going to do. Now, typically if I'm in autofocus, what I'm gonna do is have it set up to move around my autofocus point. And that's really fast and effective for autofocusing, and I do recommend that. However, since we're in manual focus, we're gonna use it a little differently. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to set it up to be a zoom function. So when we press on the area that we want, it's going to automatically zoom into that area. I have it set up to do 100% zoom, but you can also set it up to 50% zoom or more, but I wouldn't go more than 100%. What that does is right away, when you have your camera up to your eye and you're using the EVF, you just press where you want it to focus, and then you can immediately start focusing and you get to use that perfect little focus peaking, and then you half press on the shutter and it bounces back out. So you're using like basically with this setup, you're using all of your fingers for something, which is cool. And I think that it is like a really, really fast way. So like I see something I wanna take a photo of, I hold it up, I press the button to zoom in on the area that I want on the touch function. I get my focus using manual focus peaking, and then I half press to go back out and take the photo. That whole process can happen very, very quickly when you get, a bit practiced with it. And remember, when you're doing manual focus, it is a practice. It takes time. When I first started, I was using the Minolta X370, which is a film camera. That was my first ever camera, and I had to learn how to quickly use it to get focus on things I wanted to focus. It's just a process, and it's a great thing to learn. So this is a really cool way to use this function. Last tip, and you've probably heard me talk about this or others talk about this, but I think it's a great idea to try switching over to black and white. We have that awesome little black and white switch. Use that. I think it's so effective. The reason it's effective is because it makes the focus peaking way more obvious, and I think it cleans up the frame a little bit and removes distractions, so you can really focus on focus. You can really focus on your focus. Yeah. I also think that by having it in black and white, a lot of times it can help you with your overall composition because you're not being distracted by light or anything. You're just looking for light and composition, which is like the most important thing. Now, obviously, if you're shooting in JPEG and you don't want to shoot in black and white, this won't work for you. But I would highly recommend trying it. And when you put all these together, I think you get a really interesting way of shooting. So to run through that again, we change our focus peaking to only during zoom, and we bring it down to a low setting. Next, the front dial becomes our ISO. And then if we're using a lens that doesn't have an aperture ring, we change that front function button to be our aperture control. After that, half press to cancel zoom with the shutter button. Then we're going to enable our touch function, and we're going to set it to be a 50 to 100% zoom in the particular area that we want to focus in. And finally, we're going to switch the camera to black and white. And that's it. Super simple. I think it's a fun way to set up the camera, and I'd love to have some feedback from you if this works for you and if it's helping with your manual focusing experience, especially with non-chipped lenses. Let me know in the comments below, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.